All right, and we are live. What is up, everybody? This is Nick from P2W Fantasy. Back at it on a live stream. I have three great guests, and today we're talking about the 2021 incoming rookie class. And these are three guys that I respect the work that they put into the process of evaluating these guys. So I figured hitting these topics, it'd be great to get them in here. And what I'd like to get accomplished today is kind of bridge that gap between, hey, I haven't really looked into this draft class that much at all, between, hey, I've looked at it a lot, but I want to hear other people's perspectives and everything in between. So I got, again, three guys. I'm going to introduce each one of these guys. First one here, I got Jeremy to my left or right, up top next to me. Jeremy, a couple quick pointers here. Dynasty Mafia, yards per fantasy, the fantasy football playmakers co-host that should be starting very soon. Jeremy, you're a guy, I constantly share your content. You share mine. You do a great job with the threads of these rookies. Can you tell us where we can find you? Because this will be on iTunes and all that good stuff. And also what you got going on in a little more detail than I plugged right there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on, first of all. But second, you can find me on Twitter at PopesFFH. Like Nick said, I've been basically just kind of breaking down the rookies right now and dropping as many threads as I can. Still have to get to quarterbacks and tight ends, so it's mostly running backs and wide receivers right now. But other than that, I haven't been doing too much on the yards per side of it. I have a couple articles out over there. We've also been working on a pretty big rookie guide that's going to be coming out. We're actually looking for some other analysts' input. If anybody wants to pitch in, come direct message either me or the yards per Twitter. Other than that, we have the Fantasy Football Playmakers podcast that I'm starting with 2 yards per members. Hopefully we're going to get that going next Monday.
Awesome. Nice. And I have Eric with me tonight. Again, Eric actually was on a stream. It was him, me, and Paulie Sleepers, I think, right before the season started. So that was a good one back then. So had to bring you back on to talk some rookies. You're a writer and assistant editor for the Dynasty Nerds, and I know you're digging in deep with these guys. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and where we can find you?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. It's good to be back. All my work's on dynastynerds.com. I do some threads too. I'm not as proliferate with it as Jeremy is right now. You can always catch me on Twitter at EKBaller. All my articles will come out. And you said I'm doing some editing there. I'm on the Devi team. So crushing rookie profiles, and then some of my evergreen types of articles are about to kind of renew for the 2021 season. I have an intro to Dynasty guide for people that are just kind of diving in. And it's just, like the basics that you want to know to be able to like swim right in a league with Twitter people and not get eaten up. So look for that to start dropping again soon.
All right. And last but not least, I got John, staff writer at Deadspin, co-host of the Red Shirts Fantasy Football Pod, formerly known as Dynasty Beard. And you took on your actual name now, little bit different. But John, you do the Beard film session threads, which are awesome, really detailed, and I do appreciate those. Can you tell us a little bit more about, again, where we can find you and everything you got going on?
Yeah. Made the big professional switch to use my actual name a couple of weeks ago, which was a hard decision to leave the Dynasty Beard behind. But I totally created a little dummy Twitter account so no one else can steal it. But yeah, so all my writing I'm doing is over on Deadspin, covering everything sports news related, not just football, kind of covering a lot of different stuff. But they did bring me on to kind of bring some of the fantasy sports aspect to them as well. So got to do some fantasy articles in the tail end of this last season, and we'll be looking to kind of bulk that up going into this next year. So I'm looking forward to that. Red Shirts Fantasy Football Podcast is mostly dynasty focused is what we do. We're doing a bunch of rookie stuff right now. I mean, that's the season we're in. It's rookie season. So doing a lot of breakdowns over there. And then, on Twitter at John Helmkamp, doing the hashtag Beard Film Sesh. where I go and I clip a bunch of videos that I'm watching and kind of break down what I'm seeing and stuff like that. Just trying to introduce people to some of these prospects coming in.
All right, very nice. So again, we're diving into the 2021 rookies, and got some topics that we probably can cover through a full episode. But I thought we can look at specific positions and how these guys evaluate things, and we will jump into that in a second. And I always shout out Tommy Moe from the Undroppables. Tommy Moe made that. I could not make something like that, so shout out to him for that.
That thing has me really hyped. Like,
right? It's like an amp.
Let's go. Let's go.
Appreciate that. All right, so first topic, and you can be general. We could probably spend the whole time talking about this, but everybody spends their time differently when it comes to analyzing and evaluating college prospects. So can you give us some brief details about how you go and what your methods are for evaluating guys that are soon to be rookies in the NFL? Jeremy, we can start with you on this.
All right, yeah. Pretty much I mostly dive into their film. I like to see game film more so than workout film. I think like one-on-one and stuff, like for example, the Senior Bowl, that stuff's good. It kind of gives you like what their strengths are to an extent, but I like to see like in-game film. Some people and a lot of players are more gamers than they are practice players. So I usually like to go that route. And then I'll usually try to marriage that with the actual statistics that they put up for their college career and try and figure out where or whatnot. And then I usually like to go with the dominator ratings and the breakout age. Those are kind of my two like favorite, I guess you'd say, metrics or whatever to kind of place these guys where they should be, in my opinion, at least.
Makes sense to me. Eric, what about you? What's some methods that you take to evaluate incoming rookies here?
Yeah, so I was a film guy first, right? And that's still, I think, key, right? Like if I can't see talent, I'm less interested in what the metrics are telling me. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just don't see it. I really want to see it, particularly someone that I'm going to spend high capital on, right? Like I have to see it. I don't care what you guys are telling me. I don't care what the metrics say. I have to see it. This year, I've tried to be a little more rigorous about my film study and actually grading everyone out. Setting categories that were important to me or that I've heard other sharp analysts place import on, and that's actually helped a lot. Just be more rigorous because you can watch a million film clips on a guy. You can watch a dozen games, and like, how am I going to remember every play? Like, you might. I can't. I don't have the head for that. So, kind of taking notes as I go and putting numbers on things has been really helpful. And then I kind of took a head dive into analytics over the past year or two. I saw how useful it was and the kind of the power of it with the people you see that are kind of at the forefront of it and like our Twitter community and stuff like guys like Howdy and a bunch of other people, Jesse Reeves, and put together a composite metric this year, just like throwing stuff in the mix and seeing what came out. And what is it? Were there hits that I like? Who was coming to the top? And that's been fun, although you can get lost in the spreadsheets. But I've got some real cool results on that, like starting to get, pre-combine, pre-draft capital hit rates that I like, and then I'm vetting with people, and they're being like, yeah, that's pretty good. And honestly, I'm using stuff that I wouldn't think. Like obviously, the stuff that Jeremy said, like Dominator is huge. I like yards per team pass attempt for wide receivers or scrimmage yards per play for running backs. And honestly, I use that for wide receivers too because you get these hybrid guys, like the Curtis Samuel, Rondale Moore sort, and or even just guys that are doing jet sweeps, and that stuff pops for them too. And then some of what I'm doing is a little bit more esoteric, and it's using like yards per play, like over expected or over team average. And I'm actually getting some cool stuff with that too. And then breakout age, I think, is pretty huge. When you either got to be age adjusting your metrics or like factoring breakout age, it's a separate thing. And then I don't want to hold hostage to with my last project before the end of the year. I have a set of thresholds that I'm gonna break out, and I'm gonna run everybody kind of through that as a separate process and see how that goes. Like BMI over 28.5 and breakout age 21 or less, and kind of squeeze it that way too. I mean, I think that's partly just me like learning and like seeing what I like and what works for me, and partly just me being like exhaustively obsessive about it, like wanting all the information. But yeah, man, it's fun.
Man, it definitely sounds like you have not just one process, but a series of processes here. So yeah, thank you for that. And I do want to, before we go to John here, I do want to give a quick shout out to everybody popping into the comments section. We had Chris Robin, Dynasty Sons, Troy King, Dave, Gemmo, a lot of good guys coming in. So thank you for watching us live here. John, going back to the topic of your method for evaluating these guys.
Yeah, I am definitely not a full-blown analytics dude, and Eric's over here saying like, oh, I'm just dipping my toes in and I just learned a little bit, and then he drops like 15,000 different metrics that he's playing with, and I'm like, bro, I don't even know what you're talking about right now.
Right.
And it is really cool. I love that whole I don't like the debate of film versus analytics. I like the marriage of film and analytics. And I think that it's so interesting that you can analyze prospects in so many different ways. And I think that that's really cool, Eric, that you're like diving into that side of it and tinkering with it and playing with it. And like, what happens if I do this to the numbers and kind of seeing what the outcomes are. I think that that's really cool. I'm very much a film guy. And over the last year, I've been getting more and more like deep into college. You know what I mean? Like a year ago, it was very much like the Super Bowl ends, and then I'm like, okay, film study and who are these rookies that are coming out and what are my thoughts? And then this year it was more getting into Devi and more learning about college. And now I'm building out my own like database. So going into next season, I'm already going to have those rookies that will be in the 2022 class in a database that I'm compiling information on and watching film on and stuff like that. So you kind of have to like peel the layers back to get like further and further back. I'm sure eventually I'm going to be, doing what like Ray GQ does and looking at some 16-year-old from a Texas high school and trying to figure out what he's going to be when he's 28. But for now, it's a lot of film and taking a lot of notes and keeping everything organized and because it's really, if you're watching a ton of film, if you go and you sit down and you watch tape on 15 different guys, on a long Saturday, by the end of it, you're like, well, the last guy that I watched is my favorite, and you're forgetting what happened, in the early guys that you were watching. So there's a lot of revisiting prospects after taking notes and then solidifying your thoughts and your rankings that way. So it is a labor of love and a lot of fun, and it's a blast to continue to dive into these rookies and go back and see what you missed and stuff like that. So biggest word of advice would be to take the time to revisit prospects. Like, don't just watch 3 games of sample size and think that you've got it down pat and then not watch any more film on them for the rest of the offseason. So like, I'm continuously going back and layering things in.
So what I like about what I've heard from all three of you guys is that there's some similar points of things you might be doing, but all three of you guys brought up some different angles to it, which kind of tells me that people evaluate and do these things in their own way. I mean, you guys can do some similar things and take on some similar methods, but telling someone at the end of the day, like, this is the right way to do it might actually be the incorrect way to approach it. Because like you said, Jeremy, you talked about how you develop your threads and clips, and then Eric and John go into the way that they look at film, and it seemed pretty different. But at the end of the day, all three of you guys put in the work for it. So I do appreciate that, and that's the common theme I kind of take out of it there. Another topic here, kind of reflecting back on last year. So there's been a debate, or maybe there is a continuation of a debate about landing spot versus actual ability of a player. So if we look at last year, and we can say who was our guy, who was not our guy, but let's just look at the consensus of things. So from a talent perspective, maybe a lot of us thought that Jonathan Taylor or DeAndre Swift was the best running back in last year's draft class. It's subjective, right? Or subjective. But what I'm getting at is things quickly. I was going to say swiftly change. Things quickly changed when. I know. I caught myself. Things quickly changed though when Clyde Edwards-Helaire went to the Chiefs, and now a lot of people wanted to draft him as a 101. And then we look back after the season and we say, hey, at the end of the day, we might have said landing spot was more important, but was it? And there's a lot of debate on that. So has your guys' views of landing spot versus talent changed at all through the years? And we can start. I'm just going to keep bumping it down. We'll go to Eric first this time. Eric, has this view changed for you?
Yeah, I had a lot of early picks last year, and I mixed them up because I wasn't sure what the right answer was. So I got a lot of Taylor and a lot of CEH, and it took some of everybody, right? But in hindsight, the CEH Kansas City landing spot was a trap, right? I'm not saying it's I think he's underrated at this point in time, right? But talent first in Dynasty, and we all know that's one of the 101 things you learn when you start paying attention to Dynasty fantasy football, and we all fall into the trap, right? Because it's so it's Kansas City. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey. Look at Kareem Hunt, right? Look at Jamal Charles. He's going to be Jamal Charles, and he's not. He's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? I did write another note though, and I said the one position in which I might care still a lot is quarterback. I do think that you just look at guys going into a good ecosystem and what it does, and look at a guy going into a bad ecosystem, and I don't have I don't know how this all figured out, but look at Sam Darnold. If he landed on a good team, with a good coach and a good staff that developed him, what would his career trajectory be like? Put him in Kansas City, how would that have gone? I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I have a sense that can be really important at that position.
That's a good point right there. John, when it comes to talent versus landing spot, is your views for these or this debate changed at all?
Yeah, I'm echoing a lot of the same sentiments that Eric was saying. Last year pre-draft, it's Jonathan Taylor, but it was Jonathan Taylor, and then it was DeAndre Swift, and then Clyde Edwards-Helaire was my running back 3. After the NFL draft, I swapped Swift and CEH because CEH had higher draft capital and went to what I determined to be a better team overall, and I thought that his scoring opportunity might be higher. But I think I still think that was partially the okay thought process. I think that Kansas City didn't utilize him to the same extent that we saw the utilization of DeAndre Swift in the weeks where Swift showed the higher ceiling. CEH had the really, really great week 1 where I think that Andy Reid came out and basically just wanted to catch the opponent completely off guard and say, look at us. We can just sit here and run the ball down your throat when I've had all offseason to game plan for that. And they did that. But then after that, his usage went way down. There were injuries throughout the year, which I think is dampening his value right now. They brought in Le'Veon Bell basically just for a championship run and then didn't really even use him in the Super Bowl. So for me, I still think that it was an okay thought process. I think that landing spot should be considered in the equation, but it shouldn't be the determining factor that changes your outcome in your rankings. Looking back on it, I thought that Swift was a much better running back. I thought that he was more elusive, more powerful. I liked him more as a prospect than I did CEH. And those factors maybe should have won out instead of just being swayed by the landing spot. I do think that it's an important consideration, but it's not everything, and it shouldn't be the end-all, be-all when determining your rankings.
Yeah, I like that point right there. Just consider it, but it shouldn't be the number one reason why maybe we're pushing guys around or drafting a guy over another one. It could be, but Jeremy, what's your thought on this landing spot versus talent?
I'm going to second basically what John said. I think at the day's end, it should definitely be considered and it should be weighed. For example, I think last year I had J.K. Dobbins as my top running back. I just thought his film, I thought everything that he had, and I went into it thinking, oh, he's going to land. He landed in Baltimore, runs a similar offense to Ohio State. I thought this is going to be great. So you bump him up, and he just was never able to get. They just still refused to just give him the lead back role in that offense. And I think with the Taylor and CEH thing, I think a lot of the injury was with CEH, and I think that's what kind of held him back more. I think, but I think what John said, if they're in the same tier, for example, if we go into this year, the top three guys, they're kind of in the same tier. They all have similar stuff. If one lands in, say, Atlanta or something like that, maybe you bump them a spot, like John had said that he did with CEH. But I wouldn't all of a sudden say, like, Jared Patterson lands in Atlanta. It's not like he's going to go from your seventh running back to 2. I would say maybe a spot or 2 once you start falling into that, but I wouldn't get crazy with jumping guys 3-4 spots.
I like your tier point. Sorry to just jump in here, but
yeah, go ahead.
I think that's a really, really interesting note. Within a tier, I think it's okay to move players based on landing spot if they have similar draft capital and you thought that they were similar prospects coming out. But I like your point about outside of tiers, like your 7th running back isn't going to become your 2. I like that breakdown. I like that thought process.
So for quarterbacks, now I want to jump into this real quick. And John, we're going to start with you. I told you, I think I just commented on something you said that we're going to talk about this on the podcast. And I didn't want it to be a big debate. We'll get Jeremy and Eric view on this as well afterwards. But you said Justin Fields is your QB1 or you're leaning that way, right?
No, he is. I've got it.
Okay,
That's
all right.
where I have him as of now.
Can you tell us, because you'd probably, I wouldn't say you're like the major minority, but a lot of people are leaning, obviously, Trevor Lawrence, the number one. So you put that, and I think you got your own comments from certain people and things like that.
Yeah.
Can you just give us the why part?
Yeah, we want to address those certain comments. But with Justin Fields, listen, this is not me saying that I think that Fields is an elite quarterback prospect and that Trevor Lawrence is trash. I'm not doing that. I love both of these guys, which is why I think that if you're going to trade for the 102 instead of the 101 in your draft, and be happy with either one of those two that lands with you. I just did that. I sent the 112 and the 107 and got the 102. And I'm like, cool, good. I like that. For me, it's really, really close. It is kind of splitting hairs, but people talk about Trevor Lawrence and his playmaking ability with his legs. Well, to me, it looked like 3/4 of the time they were designed quarterback runs, not him extending things on his own when a play breaks down, which he did do some, absolutely. And he's super slippery and long and can gobble up ground when he's running. But Justin Fields, to me, looked more natural and athletic in extending plays and creating with his legs. I think that he's the quarterback that when a play breaks down, he can run for 20 yards, 30 yards, whereas Trevor Lawrence might not do that as much. I also think that Trevor Lawrence takes way more hits than I would like him to take, and I'm concerned about that at the next level as well. If he does take off when the play gets down, is he going to slide? Is he going to go out of bounds? Or is he going to try to drop his shoulder on an NFL, strong safety and get popped pretty hard? In terms of breaking down their passing ability, for me, Justin Fields throws probably the best deep and out ball I've ever seen. It is so pretty in pinpoint placement all the time and has a lot of strength and a lot of pace on it. Trevor Lawrence lacks, to me, a little bit of arm strength to those outer thirds deep. And that was something that I noted when I was watching the film. It's not bad. It's not like he has awful arm strength. We're nitpicking, to me, between two very, very good prospects. Peyton Manning was bad driving the ball to the deep outer thirds. Didn't stop him from having a Hall
He
of
was
Fame
okay.
career. He did okay. Yeah. So like it's not to say that one sucks and the other is great, but for me, it's kind of a preference thing in terms of what their abilities are and what I think that they can create on their own. And also to the point that Eric said earlier about ecosystem, I think there's a very, very good chance that Justin Fields lands with a better team with a better offense than Trevor Lawrence. So taking those things into consideration, I have it right now that I would have Justin Fields as my quarterback one. If Justin Fields goes to the Jets, I will probably flop the two. Like I will probably make that switch in my rankings if he ends up going to the Jets. But I'd still have him as my quarterback too. So that whole quarterback landing spot within a tier thing, it all kind of wraps together.
Hey, everything's coming together on the pot here. So you have him as QB1, but you say it's pretty close, right, for you?
Yeah, it's really close. It's razor thin. Like I love both of these quarterbacks, and I'd be happy to have either one of them in fantasy.
All right, so Jeremy, looking at your QB1, who is it? And we'll touch on if it's close for you or not.
Mine, like I said, I haven't really dove into them too hard lately. So I'm just rolling with the consensus right now, and mine's still Trevor Lawrence. But Justin Fields is right there, and I can agree with what John said. I've seen a lot of breakdowns from him and other people on Twitter that a lot of people are pushing Fields to one, and I think he's going to give you. I think he's the more athletic quarterback, like John had said, and I think in fantasy that's where it's at right now. You look at all the top quarterbacks, and what do? They run. I mean, that rushing ability is the key in fantasy for quarterbacks. And I think Justin Fields might have a better career as far as a runner, I think, than Trevor Lawrence will. And he's also, like John said, most likely landing. And I think I saw today Daniel Jeremiah had him going to Atlanta. I mean, if he goes to Atlanta, he might not play this year. But, I mean, you're walking into a way better situation than Jacksonville.
That'd be ridiculous. So, yeah, Calvin Ridley with Justin Fields.
Would be pretty nasty. Yeah. So I like to ask about the quarterback one because I obviously a lot of people would say Trevor Lawrence, but I've seen a lot of sways lately on who people are high on. And like, it seemed like a week or two ago it was like Zach Wilson. And then I see these Mac Jones clips, and I'm not saying people are saying he's number one, but it just kind of shifts around a little bit. So that's part of the reason I asked, like, is it close for you or not? But Eric, we'll go down to you to finish us off on this.
Yeah. I run some of the mock drafts at Nerds, and I took 101 to get it going in the last one, and I had a hard time with this because I went back and forth, and I'd just been digging through statistics on these guys, and for the past 2 years, Fields is better in almost every metric we care about for quarterbacks, like up and down, interception, touchdown ratio, completion percentage, adjusted yards, pass attempt. He's better for the past 2 years, right? So if I'm going Lawrence, I'm going Lawrence because a lot of smart people think he's better that are professional scouts whose opinions I respect. I'm like, well, they're seeing something, right? And then the other thing that I started digging into, because the other theory is like, oh, it's because we love him because he was so good so young. And I started looking into that. And I'm like, well, does that matter? And I started pulling up some of the lists of like comps from his like age 18 and age 19 seasons. And like, there's some busts on them, but it also puts him on lists with like Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. So he's in a cohort with some guys that you really like to be in a group with, right? So but honestly, what John said at the beginning, like I'm gonna take the better value on those guys, and that's kind of how I think about if people are like really equally ranked and I can't figure out which one I like I'm going to try to profit from it, like trade back or buy the cheaper one. Yeah. So it's, I could go either way.
All right. So, I mean, I think we're kind of seeing from each other's perspectives on this one. I like that because it seems like too many times we speak about just the same thing over and over again. So kind of seeing a little bit out of the norm here is interesting to look at. So forget about quarterbacks. Looking at this draft class, let's say tomorrow, right? You're on the clock. You have the 101 pick in your rookie draft. We don't know where these guys are going to go yet, but as of today, who is your 1-1, not counting these quarterbacks? We'll start with, I think it doesn't matter the order. Jeremy, you just go again. We'll go down the list again.
right. I'm taking Javonte Williams. I think
Yeah, you are.
always. Yep. For me, 101 always. It's always pretty much every rookie draft. I mean, Jamar Chase is nice, but I think I'm always taking a running back 1-1, 1-2, just because just what they're going to give you almost immediately. But I just love Javante's running style. I think overall he's just on par as Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. But actually, John helped point out a lot of things that I didn't like in Etienne's film that I didn't see the first time. So kudos to him mentioning, go back and take a look at these guys. And that's what I do too with my rankings is I'm going to drop an initial list, but honestly, they're not finalized until a week or two before the draft because I'll go back and I'll take a look because you miss things. Like you're just sitting there watching film, you're 5 hours in and you're just like, okay, yeah, that's a good play. You know what I mean? But I just think the biggest thing for me with Williams was I didn't realize how good of a receiver he is. There was a couple of clips that I saw, and I watched him catch it in stride with his hands and just take off. And I'm like, yep. Okay. But Najee Harris can do that too. And my big thing with him is the 2-year age gap. I mean, he's only 21. Najee Harris is going to be 23. And for me, I'm going to take those 2 years on a running back.
All right. And I like the point you guys have brought up multiple times about going back and kind of reevaluating at times, because I think a lot of us will put in the effort to look at an evaluation of a guy and just kind of stick with it. Like I can admit in the past, I've been pretty stubborn, but sometimes it just takes like a thread from somebody else to look at something and say, hey, I got to start looking back at this guy. So I like that point, and I like how it's continuously brought up in this podcast here. Eric, you're on the clock. You have the 1-1. Who's it going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to take the guy that I think has the most value with my league mates, right? And I'll usually take the consensus person unless I hate them. And I like all three of those running backs. I mean, same thing. Obviously, I'm taking a running back. And I have a lot of arguments as to why it should be Javonte, and mostly what Jeremy said, just his age 21 season, his film looks awesome. If you look at Najee from 2 years ago, is Najee from 2 years ago as good as Javonte is now? Is Etienne from 2 years ago as good as Javonte is now? Like, I don't know. I probably I've done that and I went back and they are good, right? But I do like Javonte coming into the league earlier, Najee coming in and being 23 his rookie year. Like the comps are horrible. You know what I mean? He's probably going to get better draft capital than anyone else with like his draft age and metrics. And obviously his production's been incredible. And I love the film for all three. So like right now, I would probably take Najee because I think he's the most valuable. I love him. I think he's not landing spot dependent. I recognize he's an extreme outlier if he has an awesome career coming in at his age, but I think he is, you know. I've done a lot of study of his last year's film, and if he came out last year, he was going to be successful in the NFL. You know, he would have been behind the 5 or 4 guys that are at the top of the draft last year. I get why he came back. He definitely improved his status immensely. I still think he would have been fine. I think he would have worked his way into a starting job, and we'd be talking about him as a top 15 dynasty back now. And I can make arguments for Etienne too. Etienne actually pops the best in my metrics, production wise, the age adjusted production. And I hated him, and I went back and studied this film. I was like, he's really good.
Yeah.
But so it's I'm happy with any three of them. Give me the good value. Who can I sell for the most?
That's a good way to look into it too, is who's going to have the high value in my league, because sometimes, like, for instance, even after guys were drafted, I was still just super high and I wanted DeAndre Swift everywhere, but I had the 102, right? So I knew the guy after me wanted desperately to draft Jonathan Taylor. So sometimes you just kind of play on that. And I said, hey, to move up a spot, what can you trade up for? And I think he overpaid for it. So I think kind of playing your league at times is a good point there. So John, rookie 101, non-quarterback, who is it for you?
Yeah. I'm obviously a big time running back guy. I love running backs. They're my favorite position. Javonte is my running back one in this class. I almost forget about the age component of it sometimes. And then hearing them bring it up, I'm like, oh man, that is actually a really good point that I kind of forgot about. And it does even put a little bit more weight on the scale. in favor of Javonte Williams. But for me, this is very close between Javonte Williams and another player, and we've talked about running backs enough, so I'm going to make the argument for the other side because I think it's a fair argument. Devontae Smith, for me, is so damn good at the wide receiver position that I think that he should be in consideration for the first skill player off the board. He is lethal and savvy and just smart. He's a heady wide receiver. He can win in so many different ways. He can gain leverage in so many different ways. He's one of the most polished wide receiver prospects I've seen coming out. To me, he reminds me of like a Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs type of wide receiver savant, like the one that just understands the game, the one that can win off the line, and the DB's like, where the hell did he just go? That's the kind of wide receiver that I see Devontae Smith. I think that he has in his upside to be a top 3 to 5 wide receiver in the NFL. I think that he's an incredible talent. I love what he brings to the table. And I think that he's very firmly in consideration for me to be the first skill player off the board. I love building around young wide receivers. And I think if I'm in multiple leagues and I'm there around the 103, 104 range, wherever my pick is, and let's say 2 quarterbacks go up front, and then I have the pick of being in Superflex leagues I'm talking about, and then I have the pick of the first skill player off the board. If I'm in a rebuilding mode, I'm taking Devonta Smith every single time. If I think that I'm in contention to win right now or I'm 1 year away, then I'll take Javonte Williams. Because running backs generally, if they get the draft capital, all that stuff, they produce faster a lot of times than wide receivers do. But building a dynasty roster around the wide receiver position, in my opinion, is like you start quarterback and then it's wide receiver and then it's running back for me when I think that I'm close to winning. Like I'll trade for running backs to win and I'll build value around young wide receivers. So I think that Devonta Smith is a really, really good contender there for the first skill player.
That's something I don't think is talked about enough, and I haven't thought extensively on, but just understanding where you are in your dynasty league and what you should be targeting, I think it is a big factor that I think it's kind of slept on at times. So I do like that point. I also like all three of you guys brought up some qualities of some of these guys. And when it comes to evaluating players, we often see some player comps, right, from previous players in the league, maybe retired players, current players. They kind of range a lot sometimes. I remember last year writing an article. I was trying to make a play on words. It was like Taylor versus Swift. And I was looking at all these different things for Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, like measuring them against each other. And I got to the player comps, and it was weird to see the difference in some of these major websites and what they actually said was a good comp for these guys. So if we're looking in general here, the question is, what's your favorite comp of any player that either you made or you heard somebody else make that you think is actually the most accurate? It could be any player, any position. Eric, what's one that comes to mind as a player comp that you feel is pretty true that, again, you've made or you've heard somebody make?
John just stole my favorite one, and it's Devonta Smith is a skinny Stephon Diggs. Just the play style where they can do everything, but he's not winning. He can be physical, even though that's not how he's winning. Like I see that in Diggs. I see Diggs with just that he's a step ahead of the guy, a step ahead of the DB from the time the ball leaves the center's hands to the time he's in the end zone. And I think Smith has that same quality. You know, he's not a burner, but he'll just lose guys. With his route running and his agility. So that was my pre-prepared comp. John robbed me.
Sorry.
John, do you have something similar if you did rob him, or do you have something else that comes to mind for a player comp that feels accurate?
I do have another one, and I think that I heard it first from Ray GQ over this last year. But Najee Harris to Steven Jackson makes a lot of sense to me. very similar builds, more agile than you think that they should be at their size. I think Steven Jackson is 1 inch taller and like was probably the same weight coming out of college and played about 5 pounds heavier at the end of his career than Najee Harris is now. I mean, Najee Harris at over 6 foot, 230 pounds is a load, but he is not just your downhill running back. He's incredibly agile. These big backs, you don't think of them as having hands. He does. You know, I've also heard a like heavier Matt Forte for Najee Harris, and I like that too because people forget that Matt Forte was over 6 feet tall. Like he was a taller running back. People always want to think of him as not being that, but I think if I'm remembering correctly offhand, he was 6'1", 215, if I remember his measurables. So I think those are really interesting for Najee Harris. I really like the Steven Jackson one, who was, you know, a beast early in his career with the Rams. So I think that that's a good comp for Najee.
All right, Jeremy, what's a good comp that, again, you've made or you've seen somebody else make?
John, Matt Forte was 6'1", 218.
Oh, so close.
We're close.
You're pretty close. But honestly, I heard it from, I believe his Twitter handle is Dynasty Jake. He's been a newer guy that I kind of met up with recently. He's been all over my rookie threads. But he actually comped Jared Patterson to Ray Rice, and I kind of
That
like
was me.
Saw that.
Oh, was it you too? Maybe he stole it from you. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not gonna.
It was just a chain of somebody got it from somebody.
Somebody got it from somewhere. I don't know.
But I actually really liked it. Like I was like, wow, I'd never even thought of that watching it. But then he literally prompted me to go look up Ray Rice highlights, and I was like, wow, he actually literally kind of looks like him. I mean, it's hard to know with Jared Patterson because a lot of stuff came out that UB they just didn't pass the running backs. That's just how their offensive scheme was. And so I think he can catch. I don't think he can't. I mean, I've seen some of his fleets and stuff. I follow him on Twitter, and I think that he's going to be just fine in the receiving department, but they're similar builds. And I just think both of them have really good college production. I think Jared Patterson's going to end up being a steal in a lot of these drafts. I mean, in these early mocks that I've done.
Oh, look at that. He's got the receipt.
There it is. See?
That guy Jake said he saw it from a Dynasty beard, not a John. Though,
Yeah.
so
Who's that guy?
yeah.
Well,
What a bum.
Yeah. But yeah, I really liked it. I don't know. It just stuck with me, and I can't stop seeing it now. So.
Tyler.
Is it, were you on Tyler's show, or was this a different John? Obviously, it sounds like a little bit of an inside joke here.
He makes fun of me for changing my handle. He calls me. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
All right. Hey, I mean, it is what it is sometimes, especially when it comes to business. All right. So we talked earlier. We talked about how John, Justin Fields. It was the out of consensus QB1 for you. Let's talk about another player. So let's not repeat guys here if we can. But who's a player that you are higher on than the consensus? So maybe the consensus sees this guy as a wide receiver outside of the top 5, but you have him inside the top 5 or any sort of position. What's a guy that comes to mind that this is a guy that I know I'm higher than the rest of the consensus of people, or at least maybe just people that we see on the norm here talking about rookies. So John, we'll start with you on this one.
There's a couple. I've pissed a lot of people off on Twitter lately. The one that I'll go with is De'Ami Brown. I'm really high on De'Ami Brown. I love his game. I feel like every single time that we see the quarterback drop back and load it up to put it deep, and he's off the screen, I know that he's 5 yards behind his corner, like every single time. He's so slippery and he's so fast, and he is so lightning quick in and out of his breaks. Like his change of direction is on a dime, and he can lose a defender behind him. So I think a lot of time people think of De'Ami Brown as being this just a deep threat, like just a stretch guy. And they asked him to do quite a bit of that, playing on the outside on the X. Like he played on the left a lot. The left X he played a lot in their offense. They asked him to do a lot of those deeper routes, and he was very, very good at executing them. So, like on the Red Shirts Fantasy Podcast, Matt Okada is one of my co-hosts. Matt Okada is not as high on Dyami Brown as I is. He thinks that Dyami Brown is like a John Brown, a more slender, just a deep threat kind of guy. And I can see that within his range of outcomes as well. But when I look at his route running ability and his ability to separate in the crispness that he gets in and out of his routes, I think that he is much more versatile than he was used in his offense. And I think that he can be a very good possession wide receiver at the next level that can also stretch the field. So the versatility is really intriguing to me. If John Brown is his floor, and this is someone that I can get in the late second or even into the third round in rookie drafts, I will take that all day long. But I think that he has a higher ceiling than most people are giving him credit for.
All right. And Jeremy, we'll shift up to you. Who's the guy that you feel you are higher on than the consensus?
So I checked it. I went off of Fantasy Pros consensus. I'm honestly super high on Kylan Hill. And
that was my other one. I love you. We're good friends.
I'm glad
you guys
that
are
you didn't
best
steal
friends
it.
after this episode.
I wrote notes down, and I'm like, crap, I know he's high on him, and if he takes him, like, this is gonna be bad. But yeah, I think he stands at 5'11", 209. I mean, he's a pretty prototypical size NFL running back.
I have a team.
Huh?
I have Kylan.
I had him at 215.
Oh, maybe he's even heavier. I don't know. That's where I had him.
2, 4. Oh, so his it's because I updated his size to the Senior Bowl weigh-in. So he came in at the Senior Bowl, and he came in at 5'10", 214. So like even better BMI than what he was looking like originally.
Yeah, Ramondre Stevenson got me on that one too. I was talking to someone before, and they were like
20 pounds.
Yeah, because I said he was like at 215, and they're like, he's like 220, and I was like, okay, all I knew was like 20 pounds he went down. Sorry, exact. But
I still need the backstory. Like, I'm sorry to derail. I still need the backstory. Did he cut a crap ton of weight, or was this a typo?
I have no idea.
Oklahoma, his freshman year, that someone just never corrected.
I think they listed him wrong, and he cut weight. That's what I'm getting at.
It's got to be a combination. But I mean, he looked like he was 247 on some of the Oklahoma tape. I mean, he looked
people said he was slimmer at the Senior Bowl and a little quicker.
Yeah, he looked a little quicker, but
he did.
But back to Kylan Hill, I just think that he's just going under the radar. I mean, they have him at like the consensus 40, and I have him closer to 20. Like, I just think that I have him as my fourth running back right now, I think. And I just think that he has a very good pass catcher. He gets north and south pretty well, and he just finishes runs hard. He has all the same characteristics as like the Najee Harris and the Javonte Williams. I think he was very poorly used in this year's like 3 games that he played. They just didn't use him. I think he only had like 12 touches. That was it.
That's like a 240-yard game.
Yeah, and it was it. But after that, I think he was it. Like they never really.
He logged 23 receptions this season in his 3 or 4 games, whatever it was.
Yeah, and
that's insane to me. Like that receiving ability that all of a sudden came out of nowhere with Kylan Hill.
Yeah.
To put him on pace to be like a 40-50 reception guy. It's like, what just happened?
That's the Mike Leach offense, though.
It is Mike Leach. It's 100% Mike Leach.
But he's a good catch. I mean, he catches with his hands. I mean, he does everything you want out of a pass receiving back. And I just think, for me, I mean, he's not. Don't comp him to Kamara, but like he has those type of attributes that he could be something along those lines. I don't think he'll be that good, but I don't know. I think he's a good second. I mean, honestly, you can get him in the 3rd round right now in these mock drafts I've done with people on Twitter, and I think that's going to be a steal.
And we'll get to the 3rd round too at the later end of this podcast. But what I take from this is that Jeremy and John are going to be buddies after this podcast. It seems like because they're seeing it eye.
It's got to be the mostly film weighing in there. I think I looked at his rankings, and I feel like they were close to mine too. So it's got to be that.
Yeah, he's my running back 4. So yeah.
That's
So
super funny.
Eric, who's your guy in this discussion here? Who's somebody you are higher on than the consensus you feel like?
Yeah, I just say I love both those guys. I don't know what to do with Kylan Hill. Like I get him in RB4, and I also get the people that want nothing to do with him because I think he has some vision times. There's a lot of film of him just like charging into the back of his lineman, and
I
but
I feel like
what-
he gets ahead of his feet. Like sometimes he just doesn't slow down enough, and I think that that's a little bit of a coaching thing. Where if a running back coach at the next level can help him with his patience to then see the field open up a little bit, I think that it could be really good.
Yeah, I
but
think
the good
I have
film.
I have one of my threads. Literally, he breaks off the tackle, and there's literally wide open to the left, and there's a linebacker directly to the right, and he cuts to try to beat the linebacker. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like,
But the
just
good
go
film's
off.
awesome, right?
Yeah,
The good
I'm
film
like,
on him's awesome. So my guy, I don't want to derail too far. Like, Terrace Marshall. I love Terrace Marshall.
Yes.
I fell into him in the beginning of the season. I can't remember the game. He had just an absurd blow up game with Miles Brennan, and I wrote an article on him. Just consumed a bunch of film on that. It was like, man, this kid's good, and he's such a value because a lot of the analytics stuff isn't catching him because the only season that he was the one, he only played half a season and then he sat out. But if you extrapolate his dominator for the rest of the season or use it on a per game basis, it's like a very high percentile. It's like a 47% dominator. And I just don't, there's a lot of, I've heard people knock effort with him, takes plays off, heard people knock him for other reasons, but like I don't see it. Like all of his film I've watched, like when he gets an opportunity, he just does crazy baller stuff, comes down with the ball, goes over guys, makes athletic contorting, the body contorting catches, dusts guys on his routes, short routes, deep routes, like wins with physicality, wins with speed. What is there not to love about this guy? I am hesitant to like push him into my upper tier. But it really, I mean, I got a lot of late rookie picks this in these rookie drafts, and I'm like, do I take Waddle or Terrace? Do I take Devonta Smith or Terrace? I know John, think I'm a moron for taking Terrace, but just the body type, he can be an alpha. It's like just a clear comp for me for him to be, an X receiver in the NFL. I'm not saying I have him ranked over Devonta Smith, but like he's in that tier for me, and I don't think that's like very common. And I love Diami too. I wish he would hold on when he gets hit. There's so many short routes with Diami, like with a guy near him, and he just like panic drops the ball.
Yeah.
Like you gotta catch that.
Got to work on that. I absolutely love that Terrace Marshall, and I'm right there with you that I think that he has prototypical NFL X receiver written all over him, and he's going completely slept on right now. I actually like his film better than I like Jamar Chase. Like I like his route running better. I like his separation better. I like that he can win nuanced more than Jamar Chase can. I haven't released my formal wide receiver rankings yet, at least the first iteration of them. But as of right now, I have Terrace Marshall over him. I don't like what I see out of Jamar Chase, and I think that the 6'4" size that you're getting is absolutely amazing. I think that it's so good, and I think that he prototypes as being an X at the next level. His wingspan is ridiculous. His catch radius is insane. I think that he does more well than Jamar Chase, who does a couple things incredibly well. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Totally fair.
Jamar does like 3 things elite, and I think that Terrace Marshall does 10 things at a B+ or better grade. Like,
that's
so
fair.
It's an
I want him to weigh in better at his pro day. Is my only thing, because the BMI like is like the one thing that like he doesn't check that box right now. He's a little bit light for his height, but eat some cheeseburgers, dude.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the same thing though. Like I like Terrace Marshall a lot, and I just finished watching most of my Jamar Chase stuff. And I think Jamar Chase does like this really good job of when the play breaks down. He like breaks off his routes and he gets open and he finds the zone. And I feel like most of his plays that like these big elite like plays came off of those type of plays where Burrow extended the play and all of a sudden Jamar Chase broke off the DB and got open. And then he hit him and his speed, he just basically breaks plays to the house. Other than that, I think, like you had said, John, I think Terrace Marshall's a better route runner almost than Jamar Chase is.
That's interesting too, to just kind of weigh out like, hey, this guy, you're looking at two guys. This guy is elite in these two categories, but this guy's kind of more spread out in some other ones. I thought that was an interesting point there too. We're getting close to the hour mark here, so I want to touch on two quick topics. So maybe we can just go around the room here, and you can give me a brief answer for these last two, because I think some people would be interested to hear your guys maybe just quick thoughts on this. So we just talked about guys that you guys are higher on than the consensus. Who's a player that sticks out to you on the flip side of things here that you're not as high on? Because it seems like sometimes we're all on Twitter a lot, right? We're all active in the community, but it seems like sometimes some people start hitting on a guy and then it's a domino effect. Like everybody's starting to say the same things about the same guy, you know? So who stands out to you as somebody that maybe a lot of people are really high on that you're just not as much into? And Eric, we can start with you on this one.
Yeah, for me, the obvious one is all the little running backs, right? Like people love Kenny Gainwell, and like I get it, film's electric, but just like there's not a lot of comps in the NFL that are successful at the level that I want them for fantasy football that have that like size weight combo. Like him, Javian Hawkins, the same thing with Patterson, right? Like Ray
Javian
Rice is like an
Hawkins
outlier, you know.
I
So I
can't
won't hold
stand
it
Javian
hostage,
Hawkins,
but
though.
yeah, but I'm going to pass over those guys for Tuba, for Kylan Hill, for Jefferson, right?
Right.
All right, we'll go to John.
For me, it's Rondale Moore. I'm out. I know that he is a workout warrior and can squat 600 pounds and has a 42-inch vert. I know all of these things. But the dude was throwing the ball at the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage, or 3 yards in front of the line of scrimmage on every single one of his plays. And I get that people are trying to comp him to Steve Smith, and maybe that's within the range of outcomes that he happens to be that. But for someone that people are trying to drive into first-round draft capital in rookie drafts, I'm not taking the guy that didn't demonstrate any route running ability or like downfield ability or anything like that. Like he looks like a college speed punt return dude to me that doesn't translate to the NFL. So if you want to take him, please feel free, because it's going to leave some of the guys that I actually want to draft later. But I'm not taking him, especially at that draft cap. If this is a dude that people are talking about as being a sleeper in the 3rd or 4th round, yeah, I'll take the gamble on the athleticism there. But in the 1st round or in the early 2nd, I'm just not going to do it.
All right, and Jeremy, who's a guy that stands out to you? Maybe the consensus is pretty high, but you're not as much.
I might get some flack for this one, but I just don't like Kadarius Toney. I think his route running is amazing. I mean, he might be the best route runner in the class. I mean, he just does these crazy things that I think it might have been Ray JQ that you'd mentioned. He had mentioned too, like he's vicious at the point of like he has these wicked jab flips and stab moves. And then there's one that I posted, I think, on something that he'd mentioned, that there's one move, I think he comes in, he goes to make a break at a slant and does a 360 and then breaks out. But he only had 1 year of production, and he was literally only listed as a wide receiver under a lot of the stats this year. Other than that, he was a utility guy. So I mean, he's going to get a lot of hype. There's a lot of people saying he might go in the 1st round of the NFL draft and be similar to like the Van Jefferson hype that kind of drives him up. But I just personally don't like his film, and just the lack of just 1 year production to me just kind of throws up red flags for where he's, like John had said with Rondale Moore, where he's going to go drafted. I just probably am going to stay away. I'll go with the Terrace Marshalls or the Seth Williams or somebody along those lines over him.
Take him on raw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
same thing.
And I think it's important for fantasy anyways. I mean, it'd be a boring game if we all valued people the same way. And I think you kind of just got to go with your gut sometimes for you personally, because I can tell you guys that have performed very well in fantasy that I just didn't really have that kind of feel for. And sometimes those guys end up dropping off and stuff. So go with what you feel and, how you evaluate players over like, hey, these 6 guys that I respect like them, I really don't, but maybe I should, sort of thing. Always good to kind of dig deeper in. My last question, just give me a one word for this. One word. It's going to be easier said than done. It might be a hard one to answer in one word because your drafts are going to go very different. But let's say it's the 3rd round of your rookie draft, and I know a couple of you guys in here have done mock drafts pretty often. Who's a guy 3rd round that stands out? This guy's going in the 3rd round. If he's there, take him. You don't have to dig in deep on his analysis here. Just give me like that's my 3rd round go-to. We'll start with John. John, is there a guy, I think you were doing a couple mock drafts not too long ago. Is there a guy that stands out like, hey, this guy's going in the 3rd round. If he's there, grab him.
Brevin Jordan, tied in Miami. I'm seeing him in the 3rd a lot, and he has that kind of like Darren Waller-esque build to a tight end. So that's an easy dart throw in the 3rd.
All right. Jeremy, who's your guy?
I'll give you 2 because I won't give an analysis. Demetric Felton and Des Fitzpatrick.
All right. And Eric.
Well, I see Diami Brown a lot. I don't think he's going to be there though after the draft. I don't think he'll be around. Tamori and Terry is a dart throw, but he's everything in an athletic profile. Seth Williams, he's going to go in the 3rd, and he could be an X receiver in the NFL. Could be a complete bust. We don't know, but upside. I want upside in the 3rd round. You know what I mean? And I would have said Brevin Jordan if John didn't. Brevin's my dude.
All right. I think that's twice John's stolen answer from somebody, but appreciate it, guys. And again, I wanted to bring all 3 of you guys in because you guys grind this stuff out nonstop during this time. And I've seen, Eric, you're piecing together articles in both John and Jeremy. I know you do other stuff, but I paid more attention to your guys' just threads on stuff because I think it's really appealing. So to wrap things up here, I want to make sure, because this will be on iTunes and Spotify and all that good stuff. I want to make sure that people chimed in late, or tuned in late would be a better word, that they can figure out where to find you guys. So we'll start with you, Jeremy. Can you just let us know again where we can find you on Twitter? And then if you got anything coming up that you want to plug real quick here.
All right. Yeah. Twitter, you can find me at PopesFFH. And then, like I said, we're going to start up a podcast soon, hopefully next Monday. It's going to be the FF or Fantasy Playmakers podcast. Twitter handles at FF Playmakers.
All right. And Eric, where can we find you on Twitter, and anything coming up for you?
Yeah, it's at EK Baller, like it says. I'm always on Twitter. Hit me up. Tons of articles, cranking out more rookie profiles, starting to get out more of my strategy stuff. The Intro to Dynasty series I wrote last year. It's basically the book on all of the thoughts that I think you need to be prepared with. So if there's anyone that's on this podcast that's new to Dynasty, or you love fantasy football and you're thinking about dipping into Dynasty, Google it, check it out. It's at Intro to Dynasty, EK Baller, Dynasty Nerds. It'll come right up, and I'm going to go back through it because all the examples are timely in the season. So I'm going to rip that all out and replace it with 2020, 21 examples. So I'll get that out. We'll get my pick chart out again soon. And my picks in the draft chart that I made last year are all going to come back now. And awesome. Thanks to being there.
All right. And John, where can we find you and what's coming up?
Yeah. At John Helmkamp, which I know sucks to spell. So ask Nick and he'll point you to me.
There we go.
Yeah. I'm on Twitter all the time. I'm always willing to talk. DMs are open, talking about football, fantasy football, trades. If you are just looking to get advice because you have no idea what to do, it's your first rookie draft or whatever it is, hit me up. Doing a lot of film threads. Twitter is probably where I'm doing all of my fantasy football content, other than Red Shirts Fantasy Football Podcast, which you should listen to because we'll do a lot of rookie breakdowns over there and stuff like that heading into the draft and after the draft. But yeah, those are probably the 2 main sources for my fantasy football content. If you want to read all the other hilarity that I'm doing in the sports world, it's over on deadspin.com. You can feel free to check us out over there.
All right. Thank you, three, again. Really appreciate your time. And a special thank you to everybody logged in to watch us live here or tuned in on iTunes or Spotify, Anchor, all those great things. So great podcast here, good insight. I'm sure we all could have talked another hour about some more topics related to this class. So sorry to wrap it up with what seemed like 20 minutes. But thank you guys again. We're going to wrap things up on the live stream here. Have a good night, everybody.